Hello there. Welcome to this here rendezvous with Misha Fain, Jamie McGlue. So, uh, we are talking about free speech today. By we, I mean me, and you if you're talking over me very rudely or in between, in the gaps. Hopefully, also respectfully. Or you could be shouting me down. That's cool. Making fun of my jokes. That would be good, or whatever you want to do. I support your freedom. Um, so, freedom of speech. Why we want freedom of speech. Now, I'm a big fan of double and triple meanings. So there's at least two ways to look at that. Why we want freedom of speech. Why we should want, I guess you could say, freedom of speech, and why this is a very important thing. But also, I suppose, why we because there's a certain factions who, or people who are recently coming to the conclusion that free speech really isn't very useful or necessary or even, desirable at all. So I think this is a very interesting topic. So I'd like to get into it and give you my ideas and ideas that have been handed down to me by these gods in the clouds. Oh, sorry, not gods in the clouds. I meant people on podcasts and articles and in the real world or whatever, where people have had good points, and I've thought, I like that, and it's resonated, and I've thought about it, chewed on it, and kept it. For now, I'm always ready to discard ideas if they no longer make sense to me, which is something we're going to get to today also. But right, so and so the second meaning, those of us, why we, who are saying, hey, whoa, guys, what's going on? There's a bit of censorship afoot. That's not so good, is it? Maybe some people might struggle to understand that. Like, well, but this is on the topic of blah 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 or that. So, what are you talking about? That's free speech doesn't apply to that, surely. And some people, I think, are having a hard time understanding why, say, like Elon Musk would say, well, I'm a free speech absolutist. Sorry, but I am. In why he wouldn't shut down Russian websites or the internet for Russian news outlets, I think, in Ukraine, something like that. His internet Starlink thing. He was saying, the people were saying, oh, shut it down for the Russian side. And he was saying, look, you know, I believe in free speech for everyone. It's everyone or no one. That's the nature of free speech. And I would actually agree with that. I would say that is the case. And the traditional way it's phrased is, I may disagree with you, but I will defend to the death your right to say it, to speak your opinion. So yeah, all right. So freedom. Freedom! Oh, wait. Should I put on a Scottish accent? No? Too bad. Sorry. Freedom! Right. Really, it's not the best Scottish accent, but it couldn't be better, but yeah. So, there's William Wallace shouting freedom to the sky and the stars. Freedom's nice, I guess, in everything. Freedom of expression, being able to have your fashion, and if you had ripped denim pants or trousers, whatever, 200 years ago, if they were there, yeah. Well, let's say 100 years ago, people are going to look at you funny. Go, hey, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? And so I think most people would agree that that's a good thing that our culture has moved along there and said, hey, freedom of expression in your fashion, that's fine, go for it. There's some limits, some people are like, oh, look at that dress, that's a bit much, isn't it? Or, or you might think, oh, this person's wearing a rip curl surf brand T-shirt to a business meeting. Oh, that's not really the best idea, is it? Whatever. But it's not such a big deal. Freedom has become endorsed for that. Freedom of religion in most countries. I'm not actually sure about that, but in the Western world, for sure, freedom of religion is respected, and I think in many other countries, but definitely not all of them. And so that's something that didn't exist for a long time. It was like, no, no, hey, it's not cool to break from the pack in this thing. You need to do this. But these days, like, the culture of freedom, based on the Western kind of the evolution of that through Europe and kind of Western civilization, was the idea that actually no, like freedom of religion is a good thing there. And I guess it has existed in other cultures, like I think India, had Buddhists and Hindus and Jains and whatever, and they were all tolerating that, I think, for the most part. But so not just a Western thing, but I would think probably it's been most explored in Western civilization and culture, for all its warts and you know uh, you know flaws. There's I think a lot of gold in the Western tradition, mostly around individual freedom, which I think is why the West kind of was so successful. Perhaps gunpowder and naval technology allowed it to take over the world and rob everyone and use the money to reinvest it and build these empires. But I don't think they would have lasted anywhere near as long if there hadn't been this tradition of freedom, which kind of took over the separation of church and state, etc. Anyway, that's neither here nor there for now. But freedom. So many kinds and classes, types, and persuasions of freedom. And it's nice to be free, right? We like to be able to do what we want in general. That's pretty self-explanatory. However, certain freedoms we don't allow. Say, oh, the freedom to hurt other people. However, well, no, that's not going to work, right? Immanuel Kant, I believe it was, had his universal maxim for, categorical imperative, and where he said the basis of ethics should be and shall be that do nothing unless it can be adopted as a universal maxim, whereby everyone else could do it also, operate by that principle you're operating by, and we would get along. We'd have a sustainable society. So if it's, I'm allowed to lie when it suits me, well, that contradicts itself, right? Because other people are going to do that to me, which doesn't suit me. Okay, contradiction, doesn't work. I will do whatever I want if it doesn't hurt others. Oh, that works. Oh, interesting. Great. John Stuart Mill, right? The golden rule. So, or maybe certain things, just a side note, one thing where people might say that, oh, for example, I'm breaking some small law. No, if you do that, if everyone did that, it's gonna, ruin the system. So you can't do it. I would say, well, if everyone started doing it, then there would be a feedback loop, and people would stop doing it. So actually, it is okay maybe to do that if it's harmless enough. It's just a small regulation thing, and then, built into that is you wouldn't do it once a certain number was reached, but probably that wouldn't be reached anyway, just due to people's natures. So anyway, this is an example, right? Like freedom, right? The principles of freedom, the things we can do, the things we can't do, and there's common sense kind of says, when it's something that is interfering with the balance where other people couldn't do it, then there's various forms where we say, no, you're not allowed to do that. Right. So now free speech is not just one of these freedoms, though. It's not just any other freedom where it's nice to have it, and if it's not hurting others, then great, go on, have fun, knock yourself out. Actually, free speech is the foundation of our civilization, I believe, and many other people believe, many wise people, heads full of decades of reading. This is the conclusion they've come to. And this is where this microphone and this beautiful apartment I'm in, this random guitar here. Sorry, Claire, to call you random. All these things are born of this world with incredible prosperity. The kind of industrialized, developed world, so to speak, materially developed, maybe spiritually a little bit backward in some ways. We're getting there, but anyway. So this, and just the peace, the prosperity, the perception we have managed to come to, education and movies and books and all kinds of art forms and technology and science, all this innovation and advancement and exploration has been on the back of freedom of speech. Because freedom of bodily autonomy, freedom of or the right to have property, freedom from persecution, freedom from excessive taxation. Oh, I think we lost that one maybe, but freedom from whatever. All these things, how do we figure out if we should have them or not? Freedom of speech is the mechanism by which we figure out which freedoms we should have and which we should not have. The alternative is autocracy or oligarchy, where one or more individuals and groups thereof basically either in their own head have a little free speech thing, different ideas in their own head, bouncing back and forward, having a little conversation, or in a group of 3 people, 12 people, whatever, some other magically potent number, whatever, and they're having their own free speech in their little oligarchy, elite. Or, ancient Greece, you had democracy, but only for citizens, not for slaves, and perhaps not for women. I'm not sure actually, but so and perhaps even landowners, maybe not all citizens. Or was that the same thing? I'm not sure. You could let me know in the comments if you want, or I could look it up later. So, but they had their democracy, right? But it wasn't a full franchise. And then now you have democracy, you have adult population can vote, bit warped by corporate power, etc. Things we are working through. That's all. Ultimately, that's fine. These are challenges to be sorted out. Point being, and then more generally, parents might have a conversation at home, and then the children might pipe up, "Mom, do you really think blah, blah, blah?" And they might get involved in the conversation. So in a broader sense, the whole speaking society can have a conversation. Even people who don't vote. I say, I'm not voting because blah, blah, blah. And their opinion goes out there and gets part of the ecosystem of opinions. And so free speech, this is how we sort out what is true and what is good. Maybe what is beautiful also. That seems to be this trinity which repeats. Pretty fundamental. The good, the true, and the beautiful. Einstein said that this was his ethic. The ethic of pleasure is good for a herd, but something more elevated would be beauty, truth, and goodness. Anyway, so free speech is this foundational mechanism by which we solve problems. We find out, is that true or is that not true? And is that good or is that not good? These ideas. And maybe when it takes a long time to go through this process, someone says something and you have to go, is that true? Okay. If they have a kind of persuasive argument, but you haven't had time to go look at the sources that they mention, and if they don't mention sources, then, okay, maybe it's a bit sketchy. But they mention sources. Okay, I'll look into that. Maybe you don't have time. Okay, to be honest, you have to put that in the maybe pile, I think. Me, I have an enormous maybe pile, I've got definitely true, or effectively 100% true. Love's good. Yeah, I'll go out on a limb and say that's true for sure. Um, uh, that book is blue. Yep, for sure. I mean, I could be hallucinating. This could be some sort of virtual reality. Some demon has me strapped up like the Matrix. All right, but that's for our purposes. Let's say it's blue, right? Okay, 100%. It is true. And then things that aren't true. It's red. I'm going to go out and say it's not red. Or my name is Esteban. Uh, Esteban, that's not a version of James, is it? Is the universe making fun of me? No, that's Stephen, right? Okay, so these, okay, sure, it's true and it's false. Or, hurting people, bad. Helping people, good in general. If they're hurting people, then maybe helping them could be an issue, right? But big picture, helping life or hindering life. In the middle, there's an enormous pile of, did we actually go to the moon? I think so. But then there's people who say, oh yeah, but there's this and that. Like, you can't take, photos in space. The radiation would destroy it. The flag's blowing. People say, oh yeah, but the astronauts were moving it. Okay. Or there's a picture of some dude in space, and then there's the exact same picture, but the backdrop is different, and he's on Earth doing a simulation thing, like zero gravity in a jet. Like, okay, I don't know. Like, I'm not afraid to say that I would be open to the possibility that the United States felt, well, the Soviet Union are some dodgy characters. We need a big propaganda victory. We're not quite ready to go to the moon, but we are really good at Hollywood. So come on, lads, let's have some fun here and do something good for the world, and then we'll eventually get there. I'd be open to that possibility, and I'm not. I think some people would. This is free speech, right? Some people might not allow themselves the free speech to admit what they honestly think because they're afraid of being judged. I don't want to be judged, but I'm more afraid of self-censoring than of being judged by others. I mean, it's not really going to get you very far, is it? If you're not, again, you're not allowing yourself to speak, then you're not allowing yourself to think. And so you're going to be thwarting and kind of retarding the evolution, slowing down the evolution of your perspectives. So I think, anyway, however, I would definitely lean towards, yeah, we did go there. And it seems more likely we went there, but, or someone, I didn't go there, but, I don't know about you. But, so, but maybe they filmed some stuff on Earth because, the footage didn't work, radiation. All right, we'll just reenact it. Or maybe it is genuine, whatever, who knows? Point being, I don't have enough information. There's not enough time to be looking into every little nook and cranny, an alcove of a possibility in the world. So at some point you need to focus on what's your role, what's practical for you, and diligently be aware of what you should be aware of, meet your responsibilities. The mother should be aware of all the things relating to her children. The surgeon needs to be aware of all the literature on, the job of how to cut people open and stitch them back up again, and etc. So, but I think this is the point of having a maybe pile. I think a lot of people feel like it's black and white, like you can't there's no room for nuance. But I think, if you're honest, you have to say, well, the maybe pile is going to be the biggest of all because many things are possible, and then a smaller amount, but still huge, are plausible, and then smaller but still huge amount are probable. But then the amount that we actually know, either way, it takes a lot of information. There's kind of a critical mass of information you get where it kind of locks in logically. Oh, that's not possible. This thing. Okay, interesting. That must be true or that must be false. But a lot of the time, it's not that cut and dried. So anyway, freedom of speech, and how we're talking about how our civilization is based upon this, and the need to share perspectives, and who knows what is right. So, this is the benefit of freedom of speech. We allow everyone to speak, and we need to listen, or at least most people, or most of the thinking people, or the people who are willing and able to dig into, most of all willing. I think most people are able, but maybe some people aren't wired for it. That's fine. They're wired for other things they can excel at. But most people, I think, are able to engage intellectually to a greater or lesser extent. But the willingness is the major factor. But for those who are willing and able to be an active neuron in the brain of Mother Nature and be a messenger and take in information and transmit information and engage in the network, trying to figure out what's what, free speech is the mechanism by which we figure out what's actually true, because if we're honest, none of us actually have the full picture. So we need to work in a team. That's human nature 101, right? Up the boys, up the girls, up the gals. Team people, figuring it out together. So, right, okay, so there we go. That's the basic thing. Now I'm going to try to lay out in detail why we want freedom of speech. Because people say, oh, well, no, we should censor people who have bad ideas, right? Dangerous ideas. And I think there's a very limited set of cases where, sure, we should prevent people speaking, but it's much smaller than many people might argue. So, let's see here. Yeah, so decentralized systems. Freedom of speech is a decentralized system of problem solving, whereby we can exchange ideas. We don't have to agree, but we can be exposing each other to novel information and new perspectives on things. And even if 30% of the people on each side aren't swayed, that 40% in the middle, they might be swayed on, we take them, they'll be swayed to some extent, changing their opinions. And of them, maybe 30% of them on each side are only swayed on small details. But then there's 40% of that 40% in the middle who are actually allowing themselves big transformations of perspective. And it just fractals onwards, etc. But even if some people aren't going to change their perspectives, freedom of speech allows us as a group to have this positive feedback loop, virtuous cycle of I alter your opinion, you alter mine, and maybe the way I've altered your opinion goes, ooh, the chain of things I believe this because of that, and that because of this. You just changed item 26 in the network, and then that cascades and flips these switches and means that's not true, and then that is true. And so you go through, you think about it, you come back in a month, and you say, you know what? You actually changed my opinion. However, I still believe this thing, and I have a new reason for it. I think this is the real reason. Then you might say it to me, and I go, actually, you're totally right. And so maybe I helped you help me. Because I convinced you that something you believed was wrong, you've actually adapted your view, and the way you have it now might actually resonate enough with me where I go, you know what? Like, yeah, actually, you're right. And it's not a competition of who can change the other more. Really, the game is, how can we figure out what's true? So, and that's the only bias I think we should have is a bias towards having no biases, or the only attachment should be attachment to non-attachment to our ideas. We're not our ideas. These are things we hold. They are tools. You have a toothbrush in the morning. You're brushing your teeth. Then you're going to stir your coffee. You want to be putting that toothbrush in your coffee? Maybe there's a spoon over there. Just pick up the spoon. Or maybe not a perfect metaphor, but things, or you outgrow clothes, you're going to keep wearing your 5-year-old shirt when you're 7. Or we're getting closer to the right metaphor, dear listener / watcher. But the point being, I think there's no need to be attached to ideas, because we are not our ideas, and we're not our thoughts. We are the witness of the thoughts, the experiencer, the watcher, the awareness behind the thoughts, and that's the space the internal space within which thoughts appear and disappear. So that it's not when someone is a quote unquote attacking your position. I think survival instincts kick in, and we can, we all feel it. I noticed it just the other day. I was feeling it. I went, oh, hey, interesting. I was getting defensive about, no, well, no, really, you're not, I was about to try to press the case for, no, you're missing some point. But, oh, look, the other person has a right to their point. It wasn't too important. I was like, okay, I'll let it go. And it's interesting. It requires awareness, which can be tricky, of course, to notice when we're getting defensive. We feel someone is attacking us. It's like a territorial thing of, oh, I must defend, or I'm a weakling and not going to survive. We're, again, evolutionarily programmed to defend what's rightfully ours, but sometimes we think our ideas are part of us. So I think it's a very liberating thing when you can entertain ideas and be able to feel not embarrassed to be wrong, but proud to be wrong and consciously correcting your perspective. And I think actually that is the most admirable of qualities. If someone says, you know what, actually you're wrong because of blah, 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 I always try to go, if it makes sense, I go, wow, oh my God, yeah, you're right, amazing. I'm excited because I have been liberated from an illusion. So when I don't want to be, what does it help me to keep my pride, quote unquote, when I'm the price is believing in fairy tales, So it doesn't seem to make sense to me. So I think it's win-win conversations about what's real and what's right, because either you are freed from an illusion or you free someone else from an illusion. Either way, go team people, So yeah, some examples of decentralized systems where you might think, well, I don't know about that for free speech. I think some people know more than others, or they're smarter than others. We should let an elite or certain institutions be experts at that. Certain people, sorry, Jamie, you got some books behind you, but you're not up to scratch. Leave it to the experts. That's one perspective. All right, fair enough. I respect the right for people to have that perspective and to express it naturally. However, I disagree. Here are some examples of decentralized systems which, we would all, I think, agree are very effective. So, nature, Mother Nature. So the comets slam into the earth, destroy everything, nature rebuilds. There's no central bureaucracy going, all right, so let's put some platypuses over there. Maybe, you know what, like some orangutans in that mountain valley could be good. Could you get Henry to send the memo to Senior Thompson, and he can sort it out? There's no bureaucracy managing this. It just happens spontaneously. The things which harmonize are elevated naturally. They have an advantage and they grow, and they are in the niches of the various places in the world, and they are able to adapt to the local conditions. And those who can't adapt just get weeded out. They don't survive. And so it's a decentralized system of evolution and growth. And it is why this microphone's here and my head is here right next to the microphone, pounding truth bombs merrily into the air to ravage the cities of illusion and fantasy, or perhaps fall ineffectually like rain upon the rooftops of a truth which I am unaware of. So there we go. Now, nature. Science, right? I think the universe is a huge bladder of this beast, and the bladder is okay. Let's not get too deep into this metaphor, but whatever you can. Oh no, I disagree with that. I think it's like a big river, and our world is like a stone in the river. That's what the Milky Way. It's like the river going past us. Okay, throughout history, there must have been countless ideas of what the world is. Science is a way of going, okay, so we have a theory. Let's see if it makes sense. Okay, I think the Earth is round. Okay, so let's see, when ships go off into the distance, what happens? Oh, they slowly lower down. They don't just suddenly disappear. They're slowly lowering down. Like we see the top of the ship at the very end. That's interesting. Or measuring the height of poles going into the distance. There are ways where they figured out, oh, it seems the Earth is round, not flat. And so they did experiments, they got feedback. Or whatever it is, people think there are tectonic plates, The history of science is largely people come up with a new idea, everyone laughs at them, keeps drinking their tea, idiot. That guy thinks there's tectonic plates, which is what happened to the guy who correctly predicted that there were, or hypothesized there were tectonic plates under the ground. But then they were coming up with, did experiments, got some feedback, some evidence which confirmed or certain aspects of the hypothesis. They built, other people were like, let's prove this chap wrong. All right, they do experiments. Oh, okay, we got a result which confirms this guy's perspective. All right, we better do some more deeper research to really prove this person wrong. But you're running up against reality. So, sorry, you're going to find what's true, whether you want to or not. And of course, you can bury the study if you don't want people to know. Oops, we spent all this money and time, but let's bury that study. It proves this person right. And egos don't want, if you've been teaching one thing for 40 years in a university, and then you're going to turn around and say, oh, actually, I was wrong. Again, a lot of people feel like that would be embarrassing or shameful, which I think is totally wrong. I think it's actually very admirable and brave and virtuous to do that, and necessary. But nonetheless, we are what we are. And so there's a spectrum, a bell curve, what do you call that? A normal distribution of willingness to change perspectives and to admit it publicly. So science, largely, it's been a history of Galileo, Copernicus, whatever. They're all persecuted or mocked. What's that guy? Brett? Something. I can't remember his name. Brett's the guy the Randall Carlson talks about with the Missouri floodplains kind of thing. Was it the Scablands? Sorry, in Washington State. But talking about evidence of huge floods, people mocked him, but now evidence is piling up that actually there was a cataclysmic event 12,800 years ago or so. This person was totally right. He's dead. He doesn't realize we're doing this, but 100 odd years in the future, he's being vindicated. And so it seems with science, it's a decentralized system. So people have people express their views, and other people can prove them wrong and say, hey, we replicated your experiment, we didn't get the same results. Oh, okay. Or they do it and we did get the results. Interesting. And what seems to happen is eventually some bigger changes, maybe it takes people to die off, the old generation, and then the students who are coming up like, really? You're saying there's no evidence for that? Interesting. But then when they become the lecturers, they can look into it. They haven't been teaching the old orthodoxy, so they can go, oh, actually, there's most evidence points to this thing. Interesting. So it's a decentralized system where there's no central bureaucracy saying this is what is true, and it's just truth kind of percolates upwards, and we figure out what's actually right. And slowly but surely, you will notice science has been moving, getting more accurate about the nature of the universe, to the point where modern physics is not too distant from, I believe, the kind of timeless truth, although it's not too explicit sometimes, of being and consciousness. Like, if maybe what's a better way to phrase that? Modern physics is starting to resemble, has been for some time, what Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, was saying 100 years ago in Autobiography of a Yogi, where he's summarizing all the wisdom of the yogis of India for millennia, and saying, yeah, this is the way we see it. The universe is one sea of energy, and it's conscious, and da-da-da, and a lot of things where modern quantum mechanics and etc. is kind of converging, like, ooh, that's actually seems kind of pretty close to real. Um, or and then maybe you think, oh, but that's not real. Okay, fine. But there's many examples where we have a very clear picture of, clearer and clearer picture of the nature of the world, how it works. Again, what's real, but not what's right. That's what science can teach us. I guess art is where what's right can be figured out, or free speech in general. Although art can be a very potent way of getting people's attention and expressing it lucidly and densely, like a delicious, dense, creamy espresso of perspective and education. But so, and science, this microphone is proof that this system has figured out, has made progress, and that this decentralized approach to problem solving actually has something to it. Now, the USA, all right, so it's a decentralized system, or less and less so these days, but traditionally you had the states, they had a lot of power. The federal government didn't have a lot of power. So it was hard for, fat cats to basically monopolize power, as they had done in Europe for, centuries, millennia, basically. And so you had an enormous middle class developing, and people were sort of left to do what they wanted, and they were able to keep the fruits of their labor, and this kind of natural inclination towards tyranny, whereby a small group of powerful, more educated, more wealthy people can kind of cease to identify so much with their brothers and sisters in the fields and go, you know what, maybe we could either, just rob them, or, whatever, like we can do it. It's a fair game. We're competing. We don't need to let them know what the game is, but the real game is, we're going to set the law so it helps us. It's not our fault if they're not aware what the real game is. They think they're playing some other game. They think they're playing football. They're actually playing basketball. Sorry, if your eyes are open, you'll know what game we're playing. So that's one possibility of what happens. Or another is that road to hell, paved with good intentions, where you have certain elites thinking that they can benefit the common people, but they build up a system which actually kind of perhaps snowballs by just maybe unconsciously to the benefit of the elite to the detriment of the common people. Very common thing throughout the world. You'll notice corruption, etc., bureaucracies which are kind of taxing a lot. And if they just taxed 80% less, and the people were able to keep 80% of their money, would they really be so hard by? Would they really be worse off? Well, I mean, they could use that money to get things they need on the free market. If there was less regulation, maybe people would be able to open schools, open clinics or whatever on their own terms. That's another podcast, but the point being that there's a good argument that the United States benefited from this system, and the American dream, which now is like have a car and have a big house and look really cool, was actually social mobility, which was unprecedented in most of the world. And that the idea was you could go to this place, you go there, there's no visa, you rock up there, the government gives you nothing, but they say you can keep everything you get from working. And apparently about 30% of the immigrants ended up leaving for whatever reason, who knows, but the other 70% stayed and were able to make a living. And you have countless stories of, my grandparents came here with nothing, their children were able, they worked in factories, did dirty jobs, whatever, they were able to save up, they weren't paying taxes, and their children were better off than them. And then me, the grandchild, I'm a white collar worker or whatever. So anyway, decentralized system, very powerful. Also, very importantly, separation of powers, judiciary, legislature, and executive. Traditionally, less so now, but still to some extent, was separated. And this again allowed, mitigated against the monopolization of power, and allowed the United States to become very prosperous and powerful and peaceful for a long time. Although, I mean, that everyone has a dark side. What was done to the Native Americans, America. Why was America running the Philippines? Or why do we go into Iraq or whatever? Okay, sure, there's a dark side to everything. But if you look at the traditional, what the United States was and has been, there's something to be said for the power of decentralized systems there. And again, what's the point of this? Free speech is a decentralized system of knowledge making, sense making. Again, capitalism, we've talked about a bit there, but do you want the government making your shoes? Do you want the government making your car? I mean, look, I believe the government has a definite role to play, and that's great. And I have a lot of gratitude for the work, those who do good work in the government. However, look at the Soviet Union, or countries that have tried to centrally manage things. The results are not as good as the free market. Capitalism, I think what people who don't like capitalism really mean is crony capitalism or corporate capitalism, which is actually closer to we could say communism, or socialism is a very broad term. Maybe we'll avoid that because, to be clear on what we mean when we're talking, depending on what you mean, it could be a good thing or a bad thing in my view. But it's basically fascism where the state is collaborating with corporations to the benefit of an elite, and it allows the state great power and the elite great wealth and power at the detriment of the common people. That's sort of what we have. We have oligarchies, I think, in most of the Western world, and so I think, but the core of the system is a beautiful thing, capitalism, and as Winston Churchill said, capitalism is the worst of all systems except for all the others that have been tried. Was that democracy? Anyway, but I think capitalism in itself, free market capitalism, you could call it libertarianism, or again, that could be used in different ways. But the idea that minimal state intervention, just the individuals can, there's a problem. Let me solve that problem so I can get some money, and I can feel good helping people. But whatever your motivation is, people are different have different motivations. But the shoes, people want shoes. I'm going to make some shoes and get some money, and if they're good, people are going to buy them. They're going to go, please take my money and give me your shoes. Your shoes are more valuable to me than this $50 I have here. I can't wear the $50 on my feet, and I have a few $1,000s. I need shoes. Let's trade. And the shoemaker says, I've got a bunch of shoes. I don't need this pair of shoes. I want your money. That's what I could have more of. So you have these mutually voluntary, mutually beneficial exchanges going on. And that's the micro level of capitalism and free market economics. And by people in their own environment knowing, I had a conversation with George. George said his neighbor and a bunch of his neighbors are looking for this thing. They want a local school. Well, I know I'm pretty good at writing and reading, but I've been working in this other field. In my spare time, why don't I, 10 hours a week, I'll run classes. And then maybe over the years that turns into a school. These things can happen when you have a decentralized system. However, often well-meaning, maybe sometimes not so well-meaning, regulations, can be put in, which kind of can frustrate this process a little bit, and taxation, where people don't have enough free time or money to start these ventures. Point being, this is, again, not to get too far off topic, but what I'm trying to communicate here is that capitalism in its essence is a really wonderful system whereby we get so many beneficial things. And so I would say, again, +1 to the case for decentralized systems and their capacity for benefiting us. The internet, again, another decentralized system, which it's not one person running it, many different people, and what works, people fund more. What doesn't work, I forgot to say this about capitalism, the things that don't work, if it's the government, tough bickies, what can you do? If it's a company, well, I'm not going to give you my money. And then they're going to have to adapt or they're going to go bankrupt. So it's kind of a self-correcting mechanism. It's rather ruthless, not so fun if you're the business person. You might be staying up all night worrying, oh my God, my competitor's getting more market share. I need to really up my game, or maybe I need to join them and just sell my business to that person. They're just better than me, Some turbo lady with, a pencil dress is just way better at this thing than me. Okay, join her or whatever, or lift your game, or start offering a new product or lower your prices or raise the quality of your product or service, etc. Similar thing with the internet as a it's an economic enterprise also, but allowing the exchange of information, and Wikipedia, which I think often on controversial things, I think it's got a bit of a woeful record for allowing open debate and saying some people say this, other people say this. It's like, oh, this person's a conspiracy theorist, this person's it's fairly one-sided in general on more controversial things, in my opinion. However, I'm extremely grateful to Wikipedia because I've learned so much from it. I remember being a teenager and, okay, Roman Empire, when did that fall? And then, and the Visigoths and the Vandals, who are these people? Looking in, and then go, oh my God, and then getting into French medieval history, hyperlink to hyperlink, and then you're about dinner time, okay, let's just go back. Where do we go down this rabbit hole? Back, and you just see the path you went through. It's like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is the internet, right? Many people collaborating on Wikipedia. Wikipedia, again, many websites. It's a decentralized, largely, system. So very powerful for exchanging knowledge. And again, say Wikipedia, on the more controversial things, I feel like it could be misleading people, whether intentionally or more likely inadvertently. But overall, I think it really is a force for knowledge, consciousness expansion and knowledge acquisition. So, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Decentralized systems. Art world, including music and books. No one was saying, okay, you write this book, you write that book. They're individuals, and their life experience filters through and percolates into their art, what they are drawn to share. So you have a Bob Dylan, you have the Beatles, you have Phil Lynott and Thin Lizzy, or you have whatever, all kinds of different music, and they all coming from their own perspectives, and they release the music, and it's not the easiest industry, especially these days, to operate in. And the same with books. But you put it forward, and if people resonate with it, then you can have a tribe of people who are supporting it. And this is, again, there's no central authority, but it works, and it's, yeah. All right, what else? Technology, like science, similar thing. Competition and cooperation in a decentralized system is much more effective than a centralized bureaucracy. And so it brings us back to open discourse, right? If there's just one office of people saying what's true, it's very hard to figure out how we can adapt and grow our knowledge. Whereas someone might be saying something and I totally disagree with you, but great, I'll just try to prove you wrong. And if I'm so confident that I'm right, why would I be afraid of you talking? That's great, an opportunity for me to either hone my ideas and practice, keep sharp about how I can explain myself, not be lazy and sit on my laurels, right? But actually hone my argument and explain why I believe I'm correct. Or maybe even persuade you, or learn something, modify my positions. So I think people who don't want to engage like that, it's a kind of betrays a hidden fear that you're maybe not so sure of your opinions, and again comes back to that fear of, it feels like we're losing part of ourselves, which is of course like a small death. So I think it comes back to the need to be detached from your ideas in order to learn and participate in and encourage and argue for, advocate free speech. Okay, so we're 5% done. Just kidding. Maybe. So now, I would say some cases should be silenced, but only extreme cases. People are advocating violence or they're preparing for it. Okay, Elijah, you bring the gasoline. Eric, you bring the whatever, the guns. Okay. Planning violence or advocating violence, or someone should kill that person. Of course, this should not be allowed. Like this is exceeding the bounds of a conversation and bleeding into action. And as we've said, the golden rule would say you can do whatever you want so long as you're not preventing others from doing whatever they want. And so there's that boundary, the overlap of the Venn diagram, right? Where it's not acceptable to do that thing. That's something you're going to have to cede. So I think that's pretty clear. We can all agree on that. Even someone shouting fire in a packed movie theater, that I think, that could harm people. But look, if you do that, okay, yeah, if people get harmed, you caused it, the legal system already has a way of dealing with you. So I don't think we need laws against, okay, you are not allowed to scream fire no, you're not allowed to hurt people. If a bunch of people get hurt and you caused it, in a rational world, you will be held to account for that. So easy peasy, it seems to me. Now, whereas saying we should kill this person or something, or hurt or attack that person, or cause them some sort of harm, like, oh, let's, I guess if you're saying let's not buy their products, okay, that's all right, that's your freedom. But yeah, there's a certain line you cross at some certain point, and then that's where we say this is essentially a threat. Assault isn't just if you punch someone or whatever; it's also if you say you're going to. I believe, right? The threat of violence as well. So makes sense. But people, on Twitter these days, a lot of people, and many social media sites, and in general, people are being censored and they're being removed, deplatformed. Oh, you can't be on this platform anymore. Or shadow banned, where, okay, you're here, but we're going to tune the algorithm so that you don't get as many views. Or they demonetize you, so they take away your money, so make it harder for you to express your opinions and support yourself by going deep into your perspectives and trying to channel them and communicate them for those who want to listen and engage in free speech with you and open discourse. Also, access to finance. The protesters in Canada, whether you agree with them or not, they had their funds cut off by the federal government, which is incredibly undemocratic, I would argue. And if you want to say, yeah, but they were blockading, Ottawa and blowing their horns and, tooting their horns, and so that's not fair, they're crossing the line. Okay, well, perhaps you could have that perspective, but I would say the Prime Minister should have gone and talked to them first, engage in free speech, talk to them, and if he's said, okay, I've listened to your perspectives, but I don't agree, can't come to a compromise, okay, then maybe it would be more reasonable to try and cut them off with some sort of force, although I'd still say I think they had fairly good reasons that people should be free to do what they want, and we don't need to get into that, but nonetheless, at least talking to them, but before doing what was done, and cutting off the access to the GoFundMe money and bank accounts, freezing bank accounts, etc. People being surveilled and investigated, etc. So that's not conducive to free speech. That's going to intimidate people from openly communicating. And then maybe even if in this situation you're right, central bureaucracy, and these people aren't, what about next time? Maybe next time you're wrong. And you actually needed those people to say, hey, I think you're getting it wrong. And now you've intimidated them because they're afraid of what's going to happen if they speak up. So that's not the culture we want. That's not, that's going to kind of unbalance the foundation of our extremely successful, largely, I would say, mostly, civilization. Materially very successful for sure, right? Which is important. If people are too materially deprived, then good luck having widespread spiritual success and prosperity. So it is one side of the coin. It's having enough food. When people are comfortable enough, it opens the door to going, okay, well, looking up at the sky. What else is out there, aliens. Okay, so now people will say it's hate speech, right? That's why we need to do this. There is hate speech. You shouldn't be allowed to use hate speech. Words of violence, da-da-da-da. the thing is, okay, even if that were true, I mean, words, I can say mean words to you and you're fine. Sticks and stones might break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Did you forget? Um, so, but even if, even if it were the case that hate speech was a real thing, well, a thing worth making illegal, who decides what is hate speech? Who defines it? And that's the thing which makes it, okay, this is the point we should be able to agree on. I think you can't define it. And what you define it as, someone else might not agree. And then so who's going to be defining? Say you go, oh yeah, we're going to make laws against that. All right. And then what if the way the government, the way it's phrased, it actually prohibits certain things that you like to talk about? Oh, no. Sorry, that's not what I think hate speech is. Okay, well, you're not everyone. Everyone's got different perspectives. So this is the whole point of freedom of speech, is we're allowed to figure out things together. And say, even if you got exactly what you wanted in the short term, the government's prohibiting this type of conversation, great. All right, what about when the government changes and Trump gets elected? Say you're a Democratic voter, you're like, ban all that, give powers to control hate speech to the government. All right, they've got them now. They're prohibiting all this conservative conversation. And then the conservatives take over. Now you've just given them the power to censor you. And then you're going to have to try to escalate and resist. This is going to turn ugly, right? It turns, the idea is we contain conflict and disagreement to speech so that our ideas can die instead of people. That is politics instead of warfare, right? So it's free speech allows, it's a pressure valve which allows us to let off steam. We can shout at each other, right? Might not do much good, but at least we're not attacking each other physically. And it allows us to problem solve together and make iterative small improvements toward a mutual understanding. Even if certain things we never agree with each other on, we can find that middle ground where, you believe this, we believe something similar. We talk about it for 2 days. We actually agree on something we could put to make a law about. Okay, we're still figuring out the other stuff, but we can put that law through now. We both agree. Excellent. It's not about fixing everything at once. It's about being able to cooperate to keep our solutions more plentiful than our problems, or at least to not have our problems growing faster than we can solve them. So hate speech, what is that? Who defines it? And then the thing is, even if you do prohibit people from talking about certain things, for example, the Holocaust, denying the Holocaust is illegal in Germany. I don't think that's a good idea. I think unfortunately, they missed the point of, okay, with massive government overreach in the form of Adolf Hitler taking over and doing these terrible things, the state just has complete power. This is a terrible thing. We've learned our lesson, so now the state is going to prohibit people from talking about certain things. I don't think you quite got the lesson there, boys. It's that the dangers of an inability to express your opinions and to be able to express yourself and live on your own terms, so long as you're not harming others. Like, can't we all agree with that? And to be motivated by love and honesty. So I would think even there, okay, let people deny the Holocaust if they want to. It's going to be hurtful to other, maybe Jewish people, of course, and Slavic people or homosexuals or whatever, people who were murdered by the Nazis. However, okay, that just lets someone who is offended know, okay, I don't want to hang out with you, or I don't want to purchase your products, or I don't want to whatever. Okay, that's communication. I know who you are. No problem, right? If you're not arguing for another one, if you're just saying, I think it didn't happen, okay, you can think, I don't respect your opinion, I think you're crazy, fine. But if you say you're not allowed to say it, it pushes it underground. And then I think it actually feeds that, where people go, see, if it were not true, why would they make it illegal? There's something to it. They're afraid that if we talk about it, everyone's going to realize we're right. So I think if you have hate speech or some sort of forbidden speech, I think really all you're doing is driving it underground, and you're going to actually empower that. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Bring it up. Let's talk about it. And if it's actually not true, it's in big trouble. Um, Open dialogue, you're not going to last very long, you know. And if you have 100 people and we're debating this, maybe 10 people go, "Oh wow, yeah, oh there was no Holocaust, amazing, interesting," or probably not even that much. Maybe one person, two people. Then most people, maybe some people in the middle, like, interesting, I'm not really sure. And then I think the vast majority of people probably go like, yeah, okay, that was pretty crazy. That guy just got demolished. Like, it's definitely nothing to, that this person didn't have any answers to the counter arguments of the person saying, there was a Holocaust, there's this, this, this. This person seemed more informed. This person seemed more convincing. And if you repeat that over 10 days, you have more people, the same speakers, or even the same audience or whatever. Truth percolates upwards. Most people, the vast majority, are going to move away from the position that isn't based on reality. And if we didn't have this ability, how the hell did we get to 2022? It's something where humans have an instinct for common sense and problem solving, whereby if we talk about something enough, we can figure out, we have a gut instinct for what's true. And perhaps some of us have more of a more detailed understanding of why that's so. But I think even common sense is a real thing, and there's a certain instinct for, there were more contradictions in that thing than in this thing. This one's more internally cohesive. It matches more with what I know. It's more likely to be true. And so I think it really is based on fear and a misunderstanding of the nature of human beings and open discourse to think that burying things that we can't talk about them, that's somehow going to be useful. I don't think that's actually true at all. I think it's the opposite is the case. So, what else? So this idea of, the open marketplace of ideas, truth percolates upwards, like delicious, a nectar of a coffee, yeah? That, I think that is true, and I think if you don't believe that, I think I would invite you to really think about the opposite position, because I would argue the view that, oh no, certain people, there's a certain minority of people who are better at understanding what's true. They're the people who get the jobs and they gravitate to the, say, the news corporations owned by 6 corporations or whatever, or the government or whatever, the central bureaucracies, offices where the experts kind of study what's real, or, universities, etc. And that the majority of the people, they're not really qualified to, know what's real. And if we have an open conversation, that's not going to produce an increase in awareness of truth. It's not going to shrink the support base of radical ideas. It's going to increase it because people are not smart enough. They'll get tricked. I don't believe that. I think that's riddled with contradictions, actually, much more so than the position I'm putting forward, I would argue. So let's see. Here are some specific examples of why I think this. I would say, like I mentioned, common sense is a real thing. Even children can be very wise. They don't know much. They're not very educated, but they can have good points. And I think if you take 1,000 people or 100 people, the vast majority, the way they respond to most things is going to be logical. They are aligned with evolution and what keeps us surviving in the universe. That's the human beings who had illogical perspectives and too much bias got crushed, pimp slapped by Mother Nature into the darkness of oblivion. Now, novelty in the modern world, to be fair, like as Heather Heying and Brett Weinstein talk about, hyper-novelty, right? This idea that in the modern world, things are escalating so much, this exponential development of novelty, like Terence McKenna talked about, sort of, that this is overwhelming our ability to deal with it. I would say, again, I'm not sure they're saying we're not able to deal with it. I believe they're saying we need to adapt and perhaps think of collaborative work, like institutions we can develop, as well as inner work to evolve culturally and consciously, psychologically evolve in order to deal with the new challenges of all this information. How do we know it's true? Or, all these addictive things, pleasure buttons, left, right, and center. How do we keep doing good work and stay balanced when we can just be sitting at home feeling, filling ourselves with pleasure until we just expire in a hot mess of delirious waste. So, but the idea of hypernovelty, I think, yeah, good point. There's things which are greater challenges than we've had to deal with before. So common sense, I think, could be overwhelmed with certain things. For example, the pandemic and the lockdowns around the world. Not to get into that too much right now, but I think on both sides there was unfortunately like quite a lot of people who I was rather shocked to see seem to lose touch with reality, and it seems like survival instincts and fear kicked in so strong that the usual open-mindedness of people was kind of very much more limited, and so you get these echo chambers developing, a lot of finger pointing and condemnation, and a lack of exchange of ideas, and so that would be an example where perhaps common sense can be overridden to some extent. However, I think the cure is not to, hand power to some leader, whether it's an alternative, someone arguing against the status quo, some underdog, or the status quo itself or themselves. No, I think the solution is individuals going, okay, what do I think is true, and devoting yourself even deeper to free thinking, free speech, trying to figure out what's what, and being honest about what you know and what you don't, and what should be in the maybe pile. And we've got a very majestic, towering maybe pile after the last 2 years. But then I think through free speech is the way we solve these things. And by listening to each other, it does emotionally. I think that goes a long way to healing division and helping us remember we're all one big team, are we not? But still, I would say in general, the vast majority of things, common sense, everyone agrees. Yeah, true. Don't do that. Do this. Yeah, that's real. That's not. Our opinions are more aligned than not aligned. It's just the areas where we disagree tend to be very complicated, very important things. But in general, we agree on most things, I would say, and that's common sense coming through. Sometimes people with maybe a very, caveman sort of mindset, maybe extreme of the bell curve. Certain people have, say, like their IQ, their problem solving, their ability to engage in logical thinking is perhaps limited. Not their fault. That's just the way they were born, or the way they were raised, or whatever it is, right? And it is a real thing, unfortunately, right? Where we're not all infinitely conscious and infinitely have infinite cognitive powers, right? So, but the people in the extremes, they might have very simplistic, kind of rigid ideas about what's real and what's right. And so their common sense is buried. But I believe common sense comes from awareness. Just, we are all the universe experiencing itself. We have this, the intelligence of creation itself is inside you, is inside me, inside all of us. Even inside Claire, probably. Definitely Ramses, right? Would you say? No. Really? Oh my. Then Ramses, that's a paradox. How would you be able to say no if you didn't have the intelligence of creation bursting out of your heart chakra, huh? Yeah. Trying to trick me, stupid statue. So it's coming from consciousness itself, common sense. Now, certain people, like I was saying, they might have very rigid ideas, or not be very flexible with their ideas or something. Okay, maybe common sense is kind of held back and damned behind a damn wall there. Ooh, double damned. Not blessed with a cracking of the dam. Nation. And on the other side, also people who are extremely educated, sometimes it can have a similar effect where it can cause a rigidity and an inability to turn off the thinking mind and access the balancing force of pure perception and awareness, where you've got form and formless, yin and yang, right? You're kind of penetrating deep into the nature of reality with the wielding the use of logic, but then you're also able to let reality come to you and just lay down your arms for a moment and embrace okay, well, what is going on here? And whether it be just physically looking around you and seeing the way the world is, the way it even looks to you visually, or whether it be entertaining another person's opinions which you disagree with, and being able to kind of just let them wash over you. And how, what would that be like to be that person thinking this? So anyway, you have people on the extremes who maybe aren't as in touch with their common sense, but I think most people, their common, and it's always there though, I think, most people it is there, coming through pretty strong in most cases. So, and if you think that that's not the case, then are you not lacking faith in human nature? Like we don't have enough, it's in the maybe pile, to what extent common sense and we can trust each other. But I think most people I know are lovely people. Most people I meet, they're great, Is it not the same for you? And so this abstract notion of, we're all selfish, or, people are dumb. Okay. Does that really align with your experience of other people? And would you dare say that to other people's faces? Or or people who, I mean, maybe you do, but I just think perhaps that's a little premature. And if it is the case, like, okay, so what, you're more aware than everyone else? Okay, that's an interesting and probably quite dangerous perspective. How do you know that? You haven't been other people. How do you know that they know less than you? You really have to try to be open, and that's a difficult thing, but you have to be at least open to, okay, please, like I say, the metaphor is the whale, right? The whale opens up its yawning mouth, right? And lets all the juicy waters full of plankton get in, closes the mouth, kind of exhales, so to speak, the water, and it just keeps behind its bristles the plankton and swallows it. Delicious, nourishing plankton. Same thing with truth and information, ideas. I think let it all in, entertain people's perspectives, and then see what you can shoot down. That's the filtering process. Prove it with logic. Try to shoot down. This doesn't make sense, or that contradicts this. If that's true, then that's true. But that's not true. So therefore, coming back, this must not be true, etc. Right? True, false, maybe pile. Do that, and then you have at the end of the process, okay, if something is possibly true, or definitely true, or probably true, whatever, okay, you can keep it there. If it's not true, all right, it's out. So I think this is the way. And yeah, so so if you, how would you think that you, other people don't? You think some people are just don't understand, or if you were to say that common sense and this instinct for truth, that would justify a decentralized system of exchange of information, free speech, as I'm arguing for here. The opposing point of view, I think, how would you justify that view that like, oh no, some people don't have common sense. Okay, how do you know? Also, maybe you say, well, I think none of us do. I don't trust myself either. It seems to show like a lack of trust in yourself. And if you can't trust yourself, then why should you trust that you shouldn't trust yourself, right? That's like, again, contradiction. You need to be operating on the presumption you can trust yourself. You're not perfect, but you do your best. And reflect that you are the product of millions of years of evolution, the survivors of the survivors of the survivors, etc. So there's no smoke without fire, right? You probably know something. And if you have humility and an eagerness and a curiosity to learn and be proven wrong, and to train yourself to enjoy being proven wrong, not get too far into it where you're afraid to be right, but no, press your case a bit when you think you're right, but be able to enjoy as a little treat, like, oh, I just got freed from an illusion. That's wonderful. Then I think definitely if you can build up that personal culture in yourself, maybe in your friends and your community, etc., and even in the world, by example, then I think we can trust each other to be participating in this divine exercise of coming to understand nature and the world. Now, also, the historical awareness of, look, truth percolating upward in the societies where there've been centralized bureaucracies which control what's true, everything falls apart. The societies where people are allowed to exchange ideas and debate, they thrive. That if you read a history book, and you will see that this is always the way it works, right? As far as I'm aware. So I would say really, I mentioned we need non-attachment to ideas. I think we also need to develop thicker skins. That's a great virtue which maybe has been lost. There's a bit of a worship of, to put it bluntly, victimhood, and we've all been victims. And I've been reading the Four Agreements, I think I mentioned, and it talks about the victim and the judge in your own head, and the ways that we judge ourselves and judge others, or feel victim to ourselves or victim to others. And I think a lot of that is this very basic reptilian sort of perspective. And I think, but there is a certain endorsement of, victimhood, almost celebrating that, rather than celebrating heroism and the ability to move forward. And I'm not judging it totally. I think there's definitely, it's a sign of a beautiful thing of empathy sweeping through civilization, but the pendulum swings back and forth. We need to be careful it doesn't go too far. You can go too far with many things, most things. I think balance is the only thing you can't go too far with. So polarity means basically everything else, I guess. You can go too far. So, but we need to develop thicker skins and celebrate people who, someone can say something really offensive and you just laugh. Wow, what a crazy person. I can't believe they would say that. And you're maintaining a positive state of emotion, making it easier for other people around you to be positive, easier to access their logical part of their mind, rather than maybe the more emotional reptilian instincts from the deeper older parts of the brain, of territorial stuff like fight, flight, freeze, and getting defensive and emotional in a kind of negative sense where it might cloud your vision, and just being able to not get distracted by it, not lose energy to people who have crazy opinions. Go, okay, look, or you're saying things which are really mean. Maybe it hurts you, and fair enough. But I think if possible, it is a wonderful thing to be able to develop a thick skin and be able to say, and even to say, look, people, like there are people who think that a lot of the things I believe, they would say that, oh, it's terrible. And they even say, they judge, and they say, oh, we need to get rid of these people who believe this, that. And I'm one of these people who they are judging. I don't take it personally when they're doing that, and I don't. Sometimes it might dismay me a little, like, oh my God, like the state of the world, wow. But I do my best to be responsible for my own state of emotion and go, these are my brothers and sisters. They have a different perspective. That's fine. If I separate myself from them and condemn them, I am committing a much worse vice than anything they could be doing, because I'm cutting off the very unity. So, or two wrongs don't make a right. What right do I have to say, yeah, they're really kind of not quite on point here, are they? How can I make that non-judgmental, just a statement of my perspective? How can I rest upon that perspective if I am doing the same thing to them by condemning them? So, I think, yes, the point. What was the point, dear listener? Yeah, well, I think you got the point, right? Lovely. So, thicker skins, right. And more patience and tolerance and welcoming and valuing the idea that we could have different perspectives. Wow, so cool, so interesting. And especially valuing the exchange of these. So we're not in these armed camps or just, eyeing each other off kind of, skeptically, but saying, oh, let's have an interaction here and see what happens and what we can learn, and to value that exchange and that tension of the opposites. Like, I think you can say even traditionally, I would say, masculine and feminine, which traditionally would be, say, men and women in relationships. But of course, like often you'll notice in homosexual relationships, there is a more masculine and a more feminine person. And this seems to be reflecting these two kind of ways of approaching things. It's just one spectrum of difference in human nature. There's so many of these spectrums, but that there's these opposing, the traditionally masculine view and traditionally feminine, and there is a real difference to them. That's another episode to talk about. But and so, but by together we are greater than the sum of the parts, right? And so you have these different perspectives on things, and together, when they can communicate properly, we can have this super perspective. It's almost like a two-dimensional picture from here, a two-dimensional picture from here. Put them together, you have 3D, and multi-dimensional, nuanced depth. So I think that's what free speech and communication can offer us. Okay, so now to talk about censorship. So, public libraries burning books, bad. Private libraries burning books, also bad. However, technically, they do have the right to do what they want with their own property. Now, these private companies, big tech companies like Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or whatever, who have been censoring people, whether they use that word or not, they will say it's misinformation, and we're combating misinformation. All right, how do you, again, it's like hate speech. How do you know what is misinformation and what's just a truth you're not aware of yet? But nonetheless, I would say they are private companies, so it's like a public library. At the moment, I would say they have the legal right to censor people. However, I still think you can also simultaneously say it's a bad idea. I don't have you have the legal right to live a very unhealthy lifestyle, but I can still point out that that's not a good idea, right? And if you're my friend, I'll probably try to point that out every now and again, maybe with a joke or a smile, and tell you I love you, and go, by the way, find a way to try to communicate this, right? So I think this is a thing where it's not a good idea to be censoring. However, legally, these institutions do have the legal right at the moment, as far as I'm aware. However, you could say a lot of them were developed with public money, from various sources, and so they are potentially partly, you could say, public institutions, and that argument is strengthened by the point people make that in the modern world, Twitter, for example, is the town square. Basically, that's where we talk and exchange ideas, and this is foundational to our democracies and Western civilization, and you could say global civilization, based upon the idea of property right, separation of church and state, due process. The government and the powerful can't just do whatever they want to anyone, and that ends up being good for even them, because then you have these decentralized systems emerging, which are very powerful, as we've been talking about, and so we all grow together. Even it's kind of perhaps a short-term gain that oligarchs have if they can control people, but if we have these systems, then everyone actually benefits, which I definitely believe. However, back to the tech monopolies, that say Twitter's the town square, so therefore if you say kick Donald Trump off the platform, then you're basically kicking someone out of the town square, which would be wrong, and we would say you can't do that. Everyone has a right to be here. If you don't want to talk to them, go to the other corner. If that person's following you too much, you could have a restraining order put on them, etc. Maybe Twitter needs restraining orders if people are being too crazy. Oh, you can't, for 12 months, you can't communicate with this account. They can't see you, you can't see them. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, but and so people say, and it's not just this. We're on social media much more these days, a huge amount of time, a lot of people, and very few people are out there talking to each other about a la Plato and Socrates in the town square, up and down the town square, talking about the nature of reality and what's right and what's real. So maybe what's gehal and beautiful. But so yeah, this is the case for some people are saying we should regard these things as public utilities, and they should be regulated as such. So everyone has a right to act. You can't just cut off someone's power because you disagree with them. Yeah. So then, I know Elon Musk's just bought Twitter, right? So we can hope that that's it appears that that's going to be good for freedom of speech. However, you never know what's going to happen, and but I think that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But in general, I would say at the moment, the way it is, they're private corporations. They have the legal right to censor, but the government shouldn't be censoring and should be absolutely staying out of it and not telling private institutions to censor for them, as they have been in many cases. And or the same corporations who contribute to politicians' electoral campaigns, and if you make them unhappy, they're going to contribute to the competitor's electoral campaign, and you're going to lose power in 4 years because they just swamp the radios and everyone with all the media with knocking door to door with a huge campaign of sparkling teeth and good promises. That's the way it works. If you don't play ball, it's very easy to lose power, and then you make no progress. So people say, okay, I'll just agree to these few things with them. I won't, make them unhappy, and then I can focus on these other things. I can make improvements. So the same politicians who are in this situation, where it's unfortunately hard for them to keep their integrity completely across the board, the same corporations have ownership of media, print, the heritage, traditional media, and also, I guess, mostly the traditional media, mainstream media. Direct ownership and also enormous power through advertising money. We're advertising there, and very few people are reading newspapers anymore, tuning in to TV shows, etc. A lot of the money they're getting, the vast majority, I believe, is from advertising. And so, again, if you make the advertisers unhappy, you're in big trouble. So we have the situation where censorship does come in the form of corporations there, and the government is also under the influence of the same corporations. So not to make it some big conspiracy thing, but it's just the way it is. People talk about, it's human nature to be selfish. Oh yeah, is it? Okay. Look, you think the government's maybe serving the interests of corporations? Oh, conspiracy theory. Why would they do something so selfish? It's like, okay, think about that. I mean, I think there's a balance to things, and again, a lot's in the maybe part. I don't know how everything works. I think everything's shades of grey, but yeah. So public censorship should be absolutely wrong, but I think private censorship actually is you have the right to do what you want with your own property. But yes. So, all right. And I think the thing is, deeper than that. So it must be, rather than an economic or a political intervention, it needs to be a cultural intervention. It comes from us, we the people. It comes from you and me thinking about things, being honest with ourselves, being honest with other people, talking to people, being brave enough to share our real opinions. We can talk about them, share perspectives, learn, and hone our views. And through this, if we really build up a grassroots movement of people who are really gone, it seems like a lot of the problems of the world are coming from a lack of communication and a lack of unity, especially emotional, spiritual unity, the sense that we're not all one big team. How many people would say, if you say, do you think we're all people, we're all one big team? I'd say a lot. Sadly, a lot of us would say, no, we're not. We are, except for those people, those animals, but no. Sorry, brother. Sorry, sister. I'd say we're all on one big team. But I accept that some people won't agree. That's fine. So I think it comes from a cultural movement, a cultural revival of the value of freedom, and especially freedom of speech, freedom of consciousness, and freedom of speech really. It's a mechanism for solving problems in society, but it's also necessary for us to develop our consciousness. And so to really have freedom of consciousness, you can be and you can think and you can experience and express reality the way you are drawn to. It's limited if you don't have freedom of expression, freedom of speech. and which is also the freedom to experience the responses to your expression, and so have a positive feedback loop of learning and love. So what else, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, beings throughout time and space, every conscious being? Yeah, so I think big tech and government and all this stuff flows downstream from consciousness. So, like you look at the kind of woke, quote unquote woke shenanigans flowing through, they come from the university system, and then, but people are, it's just university people talking crazy stuff. And then it gets into the big corporations because people leave university, they go there, and maybe certain big corporations go, ooh, this is a great way to make us look very left-wing and virtuous, so people don't have another Occupy Wall Street. We can just say we believe these things. Or maybe not. That's just one possibility, I entertain in the maybe pile. But you have a lot of very strange, I would say rather lacking in love. If you notice the feeling that comes with it, you wouldn't really say there's a great vibe of, love, kindness. Kind of a little bit adversarial, right? A lot of it. So if you look at that cultural, someone said politics is downstream from culture. That Michael Malice, Dave Smith, someone else, I don't remember. But I think that's true. And culture is downstream from consciousness, It's a feedback loop, I guess, but the culture being, our ways of what we think is real, right, and the way we kind of embody that in behavior, I suppose. And so I think, ultimately this comes, all roads go back to the sacred mountain of thine own self consciousness. And I think that really is the only core solution, if that's the necessary and sufficient condition for everything we want. You lay everything else out perfectly, everything goes according to plan. If you haven't got enough of an evolution of individuals' consciousness, we don't have a critical mass of individuals who in themselves have a critical mass of awareness and self-honesty and emotional maturity, etc., then it doesn't matter. Nothing works. So I think that really is the core thing. And luckily we can do that while working on the other things at the same time. And that helps. But this is the foundational thing. And again, freedom of speech is essential for this development of consciousness that's going to save us all and allow us to have pastures of plenty, I do believe, in the future. And now, why not? All right. Last thing to mention. So we're talking about the benefits and the importance of free speech, but I would say speech itself is human magic. It is magic. It's, we have our 5 senses. Think about your body. My mouth, is that for speaking? Well, I mean, my ears, they're not producing anything, communicating. Okay, they take in vibration, they hear things. My eyes take in vibration and see things. My nose takes in vibration, I guess so. It takes in data from the world, and I smell it. Okay, ooh, that sounds a bit funky. It smells a bit funky. I don't know if I should be eating this thing, or is that smoke or whatever? Taking in signals, right? Or what is that smell? That reminds me of my childhood. It's a rather mysterious event when that happens. Touch, right? Getting feedback from the world. Again, information, and then taste. Your mouth gives you taste, right? Gives you input, similar to your nose, I suppose. But so these are the 5 senses. But then your mouth is also, and your throat is also, and your lungs or whatever. We also have this ability for speech, which is where you're communicating and with yourself and with other people, and maybe with the universe to some extent, where you're communicating, you're articulating what is real, and you're sort of weaving dreams, and the way you think changes the way you experience reality itself. So This seems to be a feedback loop. Like what's that? Jordan Peterson's always going on about the Mesopotamian god. What's his name? The god of the gods. They elect him as the highest god, which seems to be a metaphor for basically the emergence of a hierarchy of value and what's most important. What's his name? Tiamat is the evil dragon monster lady thing, the devouring mother goddess. And then I can't remember. Oh well, look him up. And Marduk, is that it? And so he's the savior god and saves everyone, and then the earth, the world is built upon that. Hooray! So you can be here listening to my very brief, very concise podcast about the nature of free speech and why we want it, and why deep down you want it. Even if you think you don't want it, you actually do want it, because your consciousness wants it. The love in you wants it, no matter what an ideology might have persuaded you. That'll be my opinion. Maybe you think that's actually a projection of my own state, but that's fine. Anyway, this god, Marduk, I believe, has eyes all around his head, so he has, and he speaks magic words, and so it seems like it's kind of articulating this idea of awareness and speech being this virtuous cycle of learning, where you take in what's real, and then you articulate it, you describe what you see, and it kind of reifies it and makes it clearer for you. And then you see what you've spoken, kind of, and then you can comment upon that, then kind of observe what you've commented. And it's almost like if you try to think about something, it can be kind of a bit messy sometimes, but then you write it down, or you make a pros and cons list, you can kind of jump between what you've expressed. And so you're able to observe and notice connections, which you didn't have enough cognitive bandwidth to do beforehand. So if I need to make a big decision, often I make a list of, draw a line down the middle, pros, cons, and see what I think. And then spend probably way too much time just looking between them and kind of getting a sense for what feels good. And then maybe so this is the feedback loop of awareness and, I guess, intellect via speech, which also comes back to that yin-yang, the two sides of the coin, where I was saying maybe some people seem they're too heavy into intellect, and I've been that, definitely, at times in my life. And so there's definitely a great need to balance that with embodiment and just being and just noticing things. The simplicity of that, simplicity and complexity, are the best of friends. They love dancing, and they're great at dancing. Good Lord, got some moves. And so, yeah, it's this beautiful magic. Poetry, expressing yourself is amazing, but even, you make a joke, everyone laughs. Isn't that an incredible thing that you can just articulate something and these magic, and when you're thinking about yourself and how to improve, or what do I want to work on, or what values do I stand for, or what kind of person do I want to be, you can start thinking with words. That can affect your whole life and your whole behavior, and just these words. So basically you're casting magic spells at the end of the day, Specto Patronum, and all the happiness ensues. So that's a pretty cool thing. I mean, it's less so like, why civilization depends on free speech. But anyway, it's an amazing thing to be able to use the word, the divine word, and express yourself and thus experience yourself on this level, which isn't, as much as I love silence, there's something incredible about speech and words. So it is sacred. That would be the last word in my notes there. So so that's my free speech. What do you think? Should I be imprisoned? Should I be given a medal? Should I let Ramses do the next podcast and maybe might be more insightful? Or do you think maybe Ramses already is doing the podcast and he's communicating telepathically through me and I'm just a puppet for him to control? Do you think none of the above, or maybe you think something in between? Maybe I skipped over another possibility. All right, so that's basically enough of my enjoying my free speech here. And I think hopefully the present tide of censorship that's been washing over the planet, which has been very intense and very harmful, where, for example, a lot of things that were in the news, like the lab leak theory or something, oh, that's conspiracy theory. Then it turns out now most respectable commentators are saying, actually, we don't have enough information yet, but that is the most likely cause of where this thing came from. It's like, that's just one example. I could cite many examples, but that's not the main point, so we'll leave it there. But the point is, even if people have the best of intentions, no one knows everything. So the harm of shutting down speech, even if you think it's for a good cause, is great. And you do far more harm than good when you stop conversations. And people get out of shape. They get out of intellectual shape. They lose the ability to have conversations. People who are so used to everyone agreeing with them, or just, this intellectual monoculture where everyone just has the same opinion, they go and have a conversation with someone, especially, in the street where maybe they're not even talking to people physically that much anymore, some people. It can be very intense. People go, oh my God, you're disagreeing with me? And I think, people who haven't run for a long time, it can be pretty intense too when you go running again. Or, you haven't drawn since you're a kid. Oh my God, this is crazy. My bones are melting in ecstasy. So I think it's very important for our culture that we maintain an intellectual rigor by practicing free speech and, thinking, here's a good question. What am I missing? What am I forgetting? Or what don't I know yet? 2 years from now, what am I going to look back on and go, oh, actually, I was wrong about that, or that wasn't quite the right way to see it. Now I see it better, more clearly. I'm going to look back on this podcast in 10 years and go, presuming I'm blessed to be here by the grace of the goodly universe, oh, great. Nice work there, Jimmy James. You got some good perspectives, but yeah, I mean, you're basically a baby compared to what I know now. Presumably, I'm gonna know a lot, things I don't know now. And that's a great thing, a beautiful thing. There's always room for growth. So, I think a humility is essential to say I don't know everything, and an eagerness to learn and to talk, even if worst case scenario in a conversation there's no progress made toward the overall awareness and endorsement of reality-aligned opinions among the human population. Just going through the motions of trying to talk, that is very good for our unity, very good for our ability to keep in shape, so to speak, for having these conversations and learning. And to even, the cool thing is, once you start doing it, it feels amazing. It's not like work, it's play, it's so fun. And I think that's the great thing. It's an enormous untapped resource that I would invite you, if you're not already doing this, maybe you're doing it a bit, you could do it more. I'm sure I can do it more. Given I'm inviting you, I may as well take myself up on that offer to do it more. But is to just engage in genuine conversation, express your truth humbly, clearly, honestly, and listen to people and see if you can't learn something, and be gentle but brave when telling the world what you think is right and real and beautiful. Like you. All right. So thanks everyone for joining in this here magical rendezvous through the internets, and I'll see you next time.